Hi, so welcome to the next interview for YA ThrillerCon, and I'm really delighted to be joined today by Dana. I've known Dana for a few years now. I've done some CP work, and yeah, I'm just so excited to be talking to you. And of course, we're going to be discussing your latest release, Summer's Edge. So, firstly, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Dana Mele. I'm the author of Summer's Edge, which just came out on May 31st. It's a paranormal thriller, kind of in the tradition of I Know What You Did Last Summer, kind of mixed up with The Haunting of Hill House. And it is very good, and you should read it. That's kind
Yeah.
of my mom's opinion, but I also sort of approve it. So.
I definitely agree with that opinion. Like, I mean, it was quite a while ago when I read sort of like the early draft when I was doing sort of like the critique partner work with you on it, and I was just blown away by it. So I'd love to talk about your writing process, and in particular how you pay attention to like tension and pacing when you're sort of like doing your early drafts.
Mm-hmm. Attention and pacing. I guess tension I just think about in terms of I'll be honest, a pretty intuitive writer. And a lot of that does come from a sort of like hybrid pantsing and sort of planning out style. But so a lot of the tension does come a little bit intuitively. I like to sort of like put a lot of I like to sort of infuse a lot of the tension in the dialogue and what is and what isn't said, I guess. I come from a big like kind of theater background, and I guess a lot can be done with the unsaid. And so like I do like to let my dialogue carry a lot. And again, it's not just what is on the page, but kind of what isn't, and what kind of like passes between the characters, and what like we as the audience kind of like get that they don't get. And so I like to play with tension a lot with kind of like what we observe, but it's what's withheld from the characters. And so that's one way that I like to play with attention a lot, kind of like what we sort of like the accumulated knowledge over time that we continue to get, that they still don't, or that's like right out of their reach, I guess, is my favorite little bit, is like what they're almost able to get, but I don't let them get yet, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of that in Summer's Edge, and yeah, do you want to quickly tell viewers a little bit about what the book's about? Because I guess that would kind of be helpful to know before we sort of like dive into more
Sure.
specific questions.
Yeah. So in Summer's Edge, five friends return to a lake house that they go to every summer for their vacations. 1 year after the sixth member of the group has died in a fire. It's been rebuilt by the family of the girl who owns it. And they decide to reunite kind of to honor her and just, kind of just gather one more time before they all go their separate ways, because they're all graduating, yada, yada. And then as soon as they get there, though, they kind of second guess it. Spooky things start happening, and there's a suggestion that maybe one of them actually started the fire intentionally to kill the girl who died. And then they start being terrorized a little bit. And so it's a little bit of a mystery of like who did it, if someone did it, and what's really going on, and can they really trust each other, and also, is it something supernatural, or is someone actually doing this to kind of tease a confession out of them, or maybe, torture them a little bit because of something that they've done?
Yeah, like I know with the early draft that I read, I haven't actually read the final like published book. That's I've got the book ready to start reading. So hopefully this question still applies and it hasn't like changed massively. But yeah, I loved how you were never quite sure what exactly is going on until you're like right in the thick of things, and it was just like I was so captivated by it, and it really reminded me of We Were Liars, which is also one of my favorite books. And yeah, just like the whole setup with almost like a locked room mystery in a way, just with like that really sort of like close proximity with location. So yeah, what sort of inspired you of that location and that particular setup?
Well, I love to write books surrounding water. It's funny. I don't know. Almost everything I write has to do with either the ocean or lake, and for some reason, a lot of them are lake.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure why. I've always been inspired by water. I think it's neat and mystical and cool. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But for some reason, I wrote this by the ocean and still set it by a lake. I still don't know why I did it that way. Um, the first book I wrote, actually, also a lake played a big role, and a lot of them end up being by a lake. I went to school near a lake, and so I don't know. I find lakes really inspiring as well as the ocean.
Mm-hmm.
I guess for this one, there were some logistical things that made the ocean a little tougher to deal with. There's a lot involving a boat and swimming back and forth. And so I did know that I wanted there to be a large body of water that played a big role. And
Mm-hmm.
the ocean was just like a little too big and unruly. So the
Yeah.
lake does almost play a character. It's almost a character in itself. And so like I think the lake just had to be the lake. Because again, like there had to be kind of a body of water that was almost a character. And the ocean was a little too big. Even though I was writing it next to the ocean, it
Mm.
ended up sort of like evolving into the lake. And I chose Lake George because I like to write about upstate New York a lot. I
Okay.
live in upstate New York,
Mhm.
and I scouted a couple of lakes, and I was just like, I think it has to be Lake George. It fit
Mm.
kind of like all the parameters, and also it is this place that people do frequent over and over and over again as this sort of beloved vacation place. And I don't know, I really kind of fell in love with it as a location.
Yeah, I mean, it's such an atmospheric location. It definitely adds this extra sort of like depth to the story.
Mhm.
I also loved like the house itself and how like that becomes a character as well. Like anything with like haunted houses, like I am just like such a fan of. So yeah, like as soon as I started reading it, I was just like, yes, there's more and more things in this that I absolutely adore. Um, so yeah, what has been like the launch process like for this book?
Sorry.
What has the launch process been like with this book? Like, what kind of reception has it had so far?
Oh, it's been fun. I
Mm-hmm.
was very lucky and honored and excited that it was chosen for Barnes and Noble's YA book club pick for June. So it did kind of like take off really quickly in BNN, and that was really exciting. I got to see it kind of like all over,
Mm-hmm.
through pictures that were posted everywhere, and I got to visit a couple of BNNs, and that's just a really exciting process. I don't know. Um, with COVID right now, it's,
Mm-hmm.
I'm careful about going out too much. And, so I mask up and I don't do too many in-person things, but I did get out a couple of times. So that was really exciting. I didn't do too much in person because I am careful about it.
Yeah,
And
of
I'm just like
course.
a little like overly cautious, maybe. No, I'm
Mm-hmm.
not gonna like backtrack on that. I just but no, but it was very exciting to get out
Mm-hmm.
and to see it on those little displays and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It was very I don't know, big moment, I guess. That I wasn't
Yeah,
so.
yeah, it's definitely exciting, sort of like being able to get out again now to like actual bookstores and like be there in person.
Mhm.
Because I mean, the last few years have been so strange and just sort of like really almost surreal in a way. Um, yeah, like what has writing been like for you during sort of like the pandemic and with like lockdowns?
Hmm. It's been different.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely slowed down a lot. I used to write really prolifically. I wrote this in like a month, I think,
Oh
less than a
wow.
month. Well, I did it for NaNoWriMo, so I mean,
Right.
when I
Mm-hmm.
say wrote, I mean the first draft. But now I've been writing the same. Like I'm on, I think the first 12,000 words still of the same manuscript for months and months and months. So it's just, having um, the kiddo in the house all the time,
Mm-hmm.
at the beginning, and then just having so much more to do. Um, it's really changed everything. Also, I've had like changes in my personal life and stuff like that. But I don't know, it's just changed the way that I write probably forever. I don't write really quickly anymore. I just I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
Rules are different, activities are different, it's just very different.
yeah, I get that. Like, I mean, before the pandemic, I was like really fast at writing, and now I'm just like really, really slow. So,
Mhm.
um, I'm kind of glad. Like, it sounds really weird to be glad, but like you're finding it the same way, because every other writer that I've spoken to have nearly always said that they're much more prolific now because it's just sort of like given them more time, and that's just made me think, oh, am I like the odd one out here? But no, so I'm kind of glad that like I'm on the same page as you with this.
My brain even just moves slower now. I don't know. I can't
Yeah.
describe it. I have no more time and
Mhm.
I don't think as quickly anymore. So
Yeah.
it's changed everything.
Yeah, and like I think it's kind of helpful as well to talk about how sort of our writing processes have changed as well, and sort of like just sort of how external conditions can change how we write and what we write. Because I've also noticed that like the subjects that I write about now are a lot different since COVID. Like before, I was like much more into sort of like speculative and like really sort of like epic fantasy, and
Mhm.
now I'm like grounding everything in a like more contemporary world, but also like pre-COVID as well. So it's like a very specific time period. I'm sort of like almost like I'm trying to write my way back into that time. I don't know, but
Oh, that's so interesting. Yeah.
yeah.
It's interesting.
um
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I think my subject matter has changed too. I mean, I still write dark, but I used to write, I feel like much darker. And then the first thing I wrote after, the pandemic started to hit there were still a lot of deaths and it was
mm,
bloody and stuff, but like just the very tone of it was so much lighter and it wasn't as
right.
introspective and it wasn't just like, but what does death mean? It was just like blah blah blah, slasher, killer, let's tell a lot of jokes and like laugh it off. It's just like it changed the sort of thematically it changed.
Yeah.
And it was like I can't like Summer's Edge is a little deeper and it's a little darker,
Hmm.
like underneath it all, under the surface, whatever. And so the next thing I wrote was not. It just had to get lighter because I couldn't just stay in that darkness so much. And
Yeah.
so now I'm just, I can't can't do it anymore.
Yeah, I mean that definitely makes sense, because I know that I sort of like write for escapism as well, and
Mhm,
it's like I need to be able to put some sort of distance between what I'm writing and what is currently going on. So it's like I did try writing like with my new manuscript. I thought, oh, I'm gonna set this in times where like COVID does exist, and I just couldn't do it, like because it was just too close to sort of like everyday life. And it's like, even though I'm now writing contemporary and that's closer than fantasy and like dystopian, which I was writing, I'm
mhm.
just like, I need to have some sort of distance in some way, and sort of like, I don't know, it's weird to say that I'm still writing for escapism when I'm writing these like really dark contemporary stories, but yeah, I mean, there's still that difference between what I'm writing and like what I'm living in a sense.
Yeah. No,
Hmm.
I totally get it.
Yeah, so can I ask what you're working on now?
I'm writing adult right now. I'm not writing YA.
Okay.
And so I don't know how to say I never want to talk too much about something that I've only written a little bit of because I feel like I'm going
Yeah.
to jinx myself and hit a wall. Uh,
Yeah, that's a good point. I know when if I'm writing something, when someone asks me like what's it about, and then I tell them, I then feel like I've already written the story, and then I'm not motivated to write it as well. So that's a bit sneaky of me to then ask you what you're writing in that case. um
it's a horror thriller and we'll see how many
Yay.
pages I'm able to get out. So,
I can't wait to read that. I'm like a massive fan of horror at the moment. I've been reading like all the classics and like watching horror films as well. Partly because I'm in the final year of my MFA creative writing degree now, and I'm focusing like exclusively on horror and looking sort of at the differences between young adult horror and adult horror.
oh, fun.
So yeah, I'm just like really in that zone right now. So as soon as you mention like adult thriller horror, I'm like, yes, give it to me. um but yeah, I mean, so can I ask about these sort of like differences that you found then between writing young adult and adult?
Yeah, actually, so I'm finding my own way through that too, because sometimes I do find it a little bit difficult to find that little line, that fine line between them, because I do tend
Mhm.
to write younger characters with younger voices.
Mhm.
And when I write older characters, they do also tend to have younger voices and younger mindsets. So I did deliberately write a little bit of an older character this time. I'm less interested in domestic thrillers at this point, and domestic
Okay.
horror, just because that's just not what I'm interested in writing right now. It's too close to home,
Mhm.
maybe. I don't know. so, so when we set that subgenre aside, I think what for me is more interesting as a difference is it's always mindset is the
Mm.
difference besides voice. Because I think that you can have two characters, even the same age, that go through similar problems, but the way that they approach the problem and what is actually horrific about it really distinguishes the two.
Mhm.
So that's
Yeah, that
interesting. And it is kind of hard to like pick apart, but you kind of have to feel your way through it.
yeah. Yeah, I definitely understand that. Like at the moment, like I predominantly write YA, but now I switched to writing middle grade as well. So it's like I'm kind of just sort of like feeling my way through writing my first middle grade.
Mhm.
Because I mean a lot of it is sort of like discovering for actually writing it and seeing like what works. I found it a lot harder to get sort of a strong voice in middle grade than young adult, and I think it's just because like I'm so used to young adult that it's just taking me time to sort of adapt and realize, oh, I can't kill off every character in this book now when it's for younger children.
No.
So yeah. So did you always want to write adult, or is that just sort of like something that's arisen because of like the circumstances at the moment?
So interestingly, I started off writing adult when I was a teenager, when I was first
Okay.
writing, I only wrote adult, and then when I decided I wanted to give novel writing a second chance, I thought, maybe I should write short fiction a little bit because that's what I started off writing originally when I was a little
Mm-hmm.
kid. And I was more comfortable with short form fiction, and I still am, because I'm not a very sort of wordy writer. I'm super concise when I start, and then later people are like, "You have to describe things." Like I can't see any of this, and I'm like, But so short fiction comes naturally to me. So I did start out when I was just like, all right, I'm going to try to write a book. But first, I'm going to get some practice, and so I did start back out into short fiction, and yeah, I only wrote adult. um, and then I don't know what made me think YA. I think I just had my first like idea that was decent. I did write a middle grade way back in the day, but it was terrible. But my first idea that was decent was for people like us. I had another bad idea before that too, that was YA. But and so I wrote that, and then I just fell into like the YA kind of like track, I guess. And it
Mm-hmm.
felt, the word count was right on because it's short. And
Mm-hmm.
now that's actually what I struggle with most with adult, I think. Like, first of all, I've got like the voice of YA like stuck in my head, so that's tricky. But I really struggle with it's intimidating thinking about the word count for adult. Is like I
Mm-hmm.
start writing and I'm like, I don't think I can get to that. Like it's 20,000 words too far. So
Mm-hmm.
I just need to like get over it.
Yeah, I mean, the word count for adult is like quite daunting because I mean I've always kind of like had this idea that at some point I'm gonna write an adult thriller. I
Mhm.
am more into sort of like domestic thrillers, like with adult as well. So, um, yeah, I just keep putting it off, and then like when I decided I was gonna write for a different readership, I was like middle grade, it's shorter, and then I found that it's still just as hard to write. um, but yeah, you mentioned People Like Us, and I absolutely love that because that is your debut novel. So would you like to just tell viewers a bit about that novel as well?
Oh, sure. People Like Us is gosh, I haven't described it in a while. It's some people call it dark academia, and then I think other people are like, technically, it's not. But it takes place in a boarding school.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of Pretty Little Liars esque, in that a popular girl, and her friends are kind of followed by an anonymous texter. She doesn't text, actually. I should read my own book. She sends messages through a website after they find a girl dead, and the messages are supposedly from the dead girl. And she keeps releasing information that takes them down one by one, while blackmailing the main character, saying like, "Oh, if you don't, take down your friend, then I'm going to take you down." And she, has to navigate that situation. And if she doesn't, then she's going to be framed for murder. So.
Yeah, I mean, I was just like blown away when I read that book when it came out.
Thanks.
I loved it so much, and I particularly liked the game element of it as well, with like the clues. And I was like trying to work it out like from the clues at the same time as the main character was. And yeah, when I read books that have a game element, I get so competitive between me and the main character. I'm just like, I need to win this. And I just kind of like the twists in that book were just phenomenal, because like I did not see them coming, and yet they made sense, each and every one of them, because I could then look back and pick out specific moments and it's like, yeah, I should have seen that coming, but I didn't. And it was just wonderful. Yeah, like your characterization is so strong. And yeah, I mean, I love that in the in Summer's Edge as well, like your characters feel like real people. So do you have any advice for writers who might be struggling with characterization?
Yes, because I also struggle with characters.
Okay.
No, I guess I tend to get to know my characters as I'm writing them, through the dialogue mostly. I guess I don't know, my characters, I'll write bad things a lot where I don't connect with the characters, and then I will stop writing it. So there was actually recently something that I had been writing, thinking about pitching, and then it got to the point where just none of the characters felt real to me, and so I gave up on it. Caveat, I'm not suggesting to give up on things if you're not connecting with the characters. I guess what I'm saying is I write it until it feels right, and then like I can go back and like play with it a little bit. But sometimes I don't connect with it. And if I don't connect with it, I don't force it, I guess. So that's not actually advice at all. It's just what I do. I have to actually feel a connection with the characters. Otherwise, I actually can't write it.
Okay.
So yeah. So for me, a lot of my writing is really intuitive, and I don't really know why I do it that way. I guess it's because a lot of people can actually do that. I can't. So for other aspects, like I said, with descriptions, atmosphere, I actually end up adding a lot of atmospheric stuff and, the sensory things later, and they're not in my first draft. But the one thing I can't do is I can't create a character later, and I can't create the voice later. So if I don't connect with that pretty early on in the first draft, I tend to say, well, maybe I'll come back to this some other day. And I have occasionally, but usually that's something that has to come with like the first draft and early on in the first draft. Because to me, that like is sort of where the story comes from. So I tend to write it based on the characters.
Yeah, I mean, that totally makes sense, because when I read your work, like the two things that do stand out to me are like how believable and realistic the characters are, especially like the characters with their flaws. Like I just love that. And any sort of like morally grey character, especially like unreliable characters, are just like right up my street. And voice, like you are like such a great writer for voice. So like when you're saying like you've got to sort of like connect with it in like the first draft, and it's got to sort of come almost organically, and that you can't sort of add it in later, like that totally makes sense. Because otherwise it would kind of be a different writing style completely, because you can tell that you're a voice writer when you're reading it, and I just love those books.
Thanks.
So yeah, I mean, I just mentioned unreliable characters as well. Do you have any recommendations then for writers wanting to write an unreliable character, whether it's an unreliable narrator or not? Sort of like, how do you make them believable and not just sort of like seem a bit like gimmicky in a way, that they're sort of like almost just using it as sort of a tool or a narrative device, but actually make it believable to the character and to the story?
Maybe. I never like to think that I'm like doing anything right or well, but I do have like certain sort of like methods that I stick to pretty strongly.
Mhm.
So I do have, so in Summer's Edge, there are three different narrators, and they both tell very different stories, I
Mm.
guess, or three versions of a similar story. And that's really important to the overall narrative. And so what I did with that is, my like kind of cardinal rule for that is that to each of them, they're telling the truth. Like they're
Yeah.
telling like a very, it's very important to them that they're telling the truth. Um, as if like they were each going in front of someone and saying like, look, they're telling a lie and this is what really happened. Like they're both lying to you and this is like the actual version of things.
Mhm.
And I think like, to me anyway, that's really important for it to not be kind of like gimmicky and just like, oh, I'm not, I don't know, like
Yeah.
not that any book ever does that,
Mhm.
but no one likes to feel tricked, and I really, really don't like to feel tricked,
Mm.
and I don't like watching a movie or reading a book and just being like at the end, like "Oh, that whole thing was fake," you know what I mean? Um,
Yeah.
but on the other hand, if it's just that like people in real life are unreliable, like they
Yeah.
tell you things and you're like, did that really happen though? You know what I mean? Like you talk to two people and you do get two different versions of things. And sometimes they're very, very different. And
Mm.
sometimes they're just a little bit different, but that little difference makes all the difference in the
Yeah.
world. And that fascinates me. And so that's kind of what I explored a little bit in this.
Mhm.
Because like that little difference could be the difference between like a fight between friends. But sometimes that fight could be like with huge devastating consequences.
Mhm.
And that's, I don't know, it's fun to play with, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean that's such a good point about sort of how the reader reacts to like the reveal that this character is unreliable, because you don't want it to be sort of like a letdown where they're annoyed by it. You're sort of like managing your readers' expectations of the characters, but also you want to like reassure them that they have almost like judged this character correctly and that they're not sort of gonna um turn out to be a completely different character, or if they are, that it is sort of believable and maybe they sort of like suspected it at some point.
Mhm.
um I know when I write, I love playing with like readers' expectations, and like I always think that when I'm writing, the reader will be creating the characters in their own mind as well.
Mhm.
Like I'm only doing part of the job. So it's almost like I'm then trying to control the character that they're creating and thinking about how different readers will create this character in different ways and how I can sort of like shape that, because it's just so malleable, and especially like unreliable narrators. I'm a massive fan of them.
Mhm.
And yeah, I'm just like really fascinated by sort of any characters with like these like morally dubious natures, and like how you can explore these really like dark and unlikable characters, or rather the characters that are like traditionally unlikable,
Right.
and then like see how you can still relate to them and still connect to them and still understand them even if you don't actually like them. And yeah, if they're unreliable, and like even if they don't know that they're unreliable, or if they do, I just think like it's such a fun thing to play with.
Mhm.
But yeah, you've got to sort of like manage how your reader is also going to react to it. So yeah.
Or hope.
Yes. um, yeah. So, which books have you been reading recently that you would recommend?
Oh, I'm never prepared for that question. I have to be. I've been reading. I've been reading to my 7-year-old a lot.
Okay.
um, hmm, I did just finish something. I can't remember what it was. Uh, Sorry. I'm really bad at
Okay.
this question. Because I was just listening to my own audiobook because it just came out. So, and I do listen to a lot of audiobooks. And then I was going to reread something. Oh, ah, I'm gonna be embarrassed if I get the title wrong, but The House Across the Lake is next on my queue, um, by Riley Sager. And I hope it's The House Across the Lake and not like The House Next to the Lake or something. But it's by Riley Sager and it has a house and a lake in it. So that's next on my list. And what I actually literally just read was Super Fudge by Judy Blume to my 7-year-old, and he's excited.
Nice.
And we're also going to start soon the Tales of a Fourth Grade Nothing, which is reversing the order, but I'm excited.
Okay.
My second grade teacher, he just graduated from second grade. My second grade teacher read that to me in second grade, and it was like the best thing that ever happened to me. So I was excited to read that to him.
Oh, that sounds really fun. Yeah, like you mentioned audiobooks. I'm a massive audiobook fan. I've just like renewed my subscription to Audible because like I always like listening to audiobooks, and when I stopped for about a year, I'm not really sure why, but I've just got back into it, and I'm just like listening to audiobooks all the time now, and like it's so much fun. And it
Yes, I'm
really kind of
a
gives you a
huge fan
different
of audiobook.
experience of the story as well. Sort of like seeing how the narrator, like how we perform it as well. I find that really interesting, and especially if I then listen to an audiobook of a story that I've already read, like the paperback or the ebook, because it's a really like different like performance of it in a way. I just love that as well.
Yes. Yeah, I love audiobooks. I think every book should have an audiobook now.
Yes, I would agree with that 100%.
Mhm.
Yeah, so thank you so much for joining me today for
Oh.
this interview. Would you like to finish by just telling viewers where they can find you online and where they can find your books?
Yes. First of all, I'm going to show it to you again. This is Summer's Edge. You can find it again. It's like for one more day. It's the or nope. By the time you see, it's not going to be. But you can still get it at Barnes and Noble. The BNNY Book Club picks. I think for maybe not forever, but for a long time anyway. It's like buy one get one 50% off. So that's not bad. You can also find it probably at your local bookstore. Um, and then at the bad place, of course.
Yeah.
And then my other book is People Like Us, and I have a graphic novel called Tragic coming out on September 13th from Legendary Comics. It's kind of cool. It's a retelling of Hamlet. And that's also a murder mystery for some reason. So because it's
Wow.
cool. That's why.
Yeah, because it's cool.
Because it's cool. And you can find me online at my website is my name, danamele.com. And my Twitter is Dana Mele Books, but I'm on hiatus. You can visit me anyway. And on Instagram, a whole lot more. And that's Dana M. Mele. So
Wonderful.
website
So
leads to
yeah,
all other things.
great. So yeah, thank you so much for joining us. It's been like a really fun, enlightening conversation. And I'm just really happy to talk with you anytime about books as well. So thank
Mhm.
you.
Thank you so much.